At exactly 9:43 a.m., a royal decree left King Charles's study. It looked like just another official document until people noticed one name was missing: Queen Camilla. And palace insiders were quick to confirm it wasn't a mistake. It was planned. The document, signed by both King Charles and Princess Anne, laid out a new version of the monarchy. Only 4 names were listed: Charles, Anne, William, and Catherine. Camilla was left out completely. This wasn't just paperwork, it was a clear signal. For the first time in modern royal history, a Queen Consort had been deliberately excluded from a key document. Normally, her name would be included as a symbol of stability and tradition, but this time, she was erased. Not because of scandal, but because the palace had a new plan: a tighter, more focused monarchy. And Camilla didn't fit into it. The signatures on the decree made it even more serious. Charles signed it alongside Anne, who is known for always putting duty above emotion. By signing with her, he made it clear this was a decision about the future of the crown, not personal loyalty. It was a move that redefined who really holds power in the royal family. What shocked people even more was the silence. No public statement, no explanation, just a document, a missing name, and a message that said everything without saying a word. Camilla, once seen as the king's closest ally, was no longer part of the plan. Palace staff called it a quiet earthquake. It wasn't loud, but it shook the system. Because this change didn't just cut someone from a list, it changed the direction of the monarchy itself. And now, as the world starts asking why this happened, one thing is clear. If we want to understand the real reason behind Camilla's removal, we have to go back to the silent power struggles that led to this moment. She never wanted the spotlight. Now, she controls the monarchy's future. In a world where royal prestige is often measured in magazine covers and global headlines, Princess Anne carved her path in silence, unshaken by public glamour. Unmoved by the need for recognition, she has quietly become the most powerful figure inside the palace. While the world looked to Charles as the new king and speculated on Camilla's evolving image, it was Anne, disciplined, reserved, and relentlessly dutiful, who was quietly shaping the royal institution from within. Not through spectacle, but through consistency. Not with charm, but with conviction. In the shadows of history, she rose, and now her influence is impossible to ignore. When Charles ascended the throne, the monarchy found itself at a crossroads. The passing of Queen Elizabeth II had not only marked the end of an era, but left behind a towering legacy of unshakable discipline and devotion to service. For the institution to survive, it needed a stabilizer, someone who wouldn't chase popularity, but preserve purpose. That stabilizer was Anne. With quiet precision, she stepped into roles that others weren't prepared for. She didn't announce her ascension in flashy statements. She simply got to work. From state functions to military engagements, from diplomacy to internal oversight, Anne became the royal family's anchor in a storm of change. Her workload surged, not as a favor, but as a necessity. Charles, overwhelmed with ceremonial responsibilities, leaned on someone he could trust without hesitation. That trust wasn't given lightly. It was earned over decades of tireless, thankless service. Unlike others who dabbled in royal duty between scandals and sabbaticals, Anne never wavered. She mirrored her mother's ethos to the letter: stoic, restrained, and fiercely loyal. And it showed. Inside palace walls, aides began referring to her as the steel within the crown. Her mere presence in a room shifted the mood. Meetings grew sharper, strategies more refined. She wasn't there to sugarcoat decisions or maintain appearances. She was there to protect the monarchy from itself. As Charles wrestled with the burden of modernizing the monarchy while preserving its mystique, Anne became the quiet architect of that balance. She championed reforms not through public speeches, but through private insistence. She understood the cost of excess and the value of restraint. And where Camilla sought to expand her ceremonial footprint, Anne worked to contain it. Not out of malice, but out of duty. Because Anne hadn't forgotten the careful language Queen Elizabeth once used, Camilla was to be a Queen Consort, not a queen. That distinction mattered. And when those lines began to blur, Anne was the one to draw them again with ink, with policy, and eventually with a signature beside her brother's. In a royal family often pulled apart by ego and emotion, Anne became the constant. The one person everyone respected, even if they feared her candor. Her rise wasn't born from ambition, it was the result of necessity. She was the only senior royal untouched by scandal, untouched by doubt. And in a monarchy that could no longer afford uncertainty, that made her irreplaceable. Charles may wear the crown, but Anne is the strategist behind it. But with every rise, someone must fall. And in this case, it was the Queen Consort herself. The woman once at Charles's side now finds herself excluded by ink, by silence, and by strategy. Once hailed as a symbol of personal triumph, a queen who rose above decades of scandal and public disapproval, Camilla now walks the gilded halls of the monarchy in near solitude. The change didn't arrive with fanfare or fury. It came slowly, deliberately, like frost creeping over glass. Her name vanished from official documents. Invitations to key briefings never arrived. Meetings where she once sat beside the king now proceeded without her. The Queen Consort, who had once shared the spotlight at Charles's coronation, now found herself watching the institution she helped legitimize quietly retreat from her. It started with details subtle at first, but impossible to ignore. Her private office, once intricately tied to Buckingham Palace operations, began operating on a separate, almost isolated track. Communications arrived late, sometimes not at all. Planning documents for state events skipped her entirely. Senior staff who once reported directly to her were reassigned. What had once been a seamless role in the day-to-day rhythm of the monarchy was now fragmented, hollowed out, and distant. The Queen Consort was still smiling in public, still appearing at select events, but insiders knew the truth. Her influence was shrinking by the hour. No statement had been made, no declaration issued. But Camilla's exclusion spoke louder than words. There was no confrontation to fight, no headline to respond to, just empty chairs at briefings, decisions made without her, and duties reassigned quietly, permanently. It was an institutional cold shoulder dressed in silence. Even ceremonial roles, long seen as the lifeblood of a Queen Consort's public identity, were quietly pulled away. Events she once championed were now spearheaded by Princess Catherine. Patronages were reviewed, appearances cancelled or passed on to younger royals, with less controversy trailing behind them. Desperate not to become irrelevant, Camilla had made a push in recent months to reassert herself. She added new public engagements, lobbied for expanded ceremonial duties, and tried to reinforce her position beside Charles, but it was too late. The monarchy had already begun to reshape itself without her. Every effort she made to be seen, to remain part of the narrative, seemed only to confirm how far removed she'd become. Her energy could not reverse the quiet. Retreat already underway behind closed doors, and still, she endured. Smiling for the cameras, holding court at garden parties, appearing dignified in the face of growing distance. But those closest to her noticed the shift, the weight behind her eyes, the stiffness in her once confident presence. Because Camilla wasn't just being left out, she was being phased out, strategically, relentlessly, and behind the silence. A decision that would break the very heart of a decades-long love story. He waited a lifetime for the crown, and now it demanded more than his heart could bear. For decades, Charles had stood by Camilla when it would have been easier to walk away. Through scandal, public outrage, and the unwavering shadow of Diana's memory, he never let her go. Their love had defied the rigid rules of royal tradition. It had endured whispers, headlines, and fierce disapproval. And when the time finally came to crown her Queen Consort, it was seen as the ultimate validation, a symbol of personal triumph and unwavering devotion. But what no one saw coming was how quickly that triumph would collide with the cold machinery of monarchy. From the moment Charles took the throne, the weight of the crown settled heavier than he'd imagined. He wasn't just a man anymore. He was the institution. And as public pressure mounted to modernize and reduce the royal family's footprint, those closest to him began drawing lines, hard lines. Palace insiders, seasoned courtiers, and senior advisors made it clear. The future of the monarchy demanded clarity, efficiency, and above all, unity. And in that vision, Camilla's place began to look complicated. Her presence, while once a comfort, had become a question mark, an unpredictable variable in an institution that could no longer afford them. At the center of that transformation stood Princess Anne. Her loyalty to the late Taitsu's Queen's vision remained absolute, and her stance was unshakable. The monarchy, in her eyes, was a machine of duty, not emotion. She believed that every step forward had to be calculated, unburdened by sentiment, and rooted in tradition. When the final draft of the royal decree was laid out, it was Anne who insisted the names be limited to the 4 pillars: Charles, herself, William, and Catherine, the monarchy's new core. Camilla's inclusion, she argued, would dilute the message and weaken the institution's stance at a critical moment. Charles didn't reject the proposal outright, but he didn't accept it easily either. For days, he reportedly hesitated, requesting revisions, debating phrasing, and reading through every word with growing unease. Palace staff described him as distracted and restless, walking the halls of his private quarters, torn between the woman he loved and the legacy he was sworn to protect. He knew what the omission would signal not just to the public, but to Camilla. It wouldn't just be a political decision. It would be a personal wound, and still, the pressure kept building. The world was watching. The government was growing, impatient. Anne's resolve never cracked, and so, when the final document was placed before him, Charles didn't speak. He simply picked up the pen. And in that moment, he didn't sign as a husband. He signed as a king. The name was absent. The message was unmistakable. And with that signature, everything changed. But the real storm came not from inside the palace, but from the world outside it. 15 minutes after the leak, Camilla's erasure was everywhere, and everyone had an opinion. The press didn't need time to process. It didn't need context. It needed a headline, and Camilla's name missing from the royal decree delivered it with brutal precision. Queen no more. Camilla cut from crown, erased by her own. Within moments, tabloids, broadsheets, and broadcasters transformed what had been a quiet internal decision into a global media firestorm. It wasn't just a story, it was a reckoning. And Camilla was no longer a queen consort. She was a symbol, a flashpoint, a woman simultaneously defended and dismantled in front of the entire world. Social media erupted. 2 camps formed, both fierce, both unrelenting. On one side were those who saw the exclusion as justice retribution for a history they never forgave. For them, this was a restoration of Diana's legacy, a correction to a storyline they believed had been forcibly rewritten. They called it long overdue, a necessary purging, a return to values they believed Camilla never represented. But on the other side were those who had come to see Camilla not as a usurper, but as a survivor. A woman who had endured decades of venom and emerged with grace. To them, the monarchy's move felt cold, calculated, and cruel. The betrayal of a woman who had given everything and now found herself discarded like a footnote in someone else's legacy. Polls emerged within hours. One after another confirmed what the palace had suspected but never said out loud. The public trusted Anne deeply. A staggering 62% supported the decision to remove Camilla from the royal decree. When asked why, most pointed to Anne's quiet integrity, her lifelong service, her unshakable alignment with Queen Elizabeth's values. Camilla's support, meanwhile, dropped faster than anyone anticipated. Her approval ratings, once gradually climbing in the wake of her coronation, plunged beneath the surface. To many, the narrative had shifted. She was no longer the woman who had weathered scandal. She was now the woman who had overstepped. And in this storm, something else became clear. The monarchy, bruised and bloodied from years of scandal, had begun stitching itself back together, not through spectacle, but through strategy. Anne and Catherine emerged as the new faces of trust. Their reputations, carefully earned through restraint and responsibility, became the monarchy's shield. Together, they represented a kind of royalty the public was learning to believe in, again measured, modern, and unmistakably grounded. The message was no longer hidden. It was on every front page, every poll, every broadcast. The monarchy had spoken. The public had answered. Camilla was no longer at the center of the crown's future. And yet, if the monarchy was clear on its new path, Camilla wasn't ready to step aside just yet. She hasn't spoken publicly, but insiders say she's planning something. In the wake of a public demotion that silenced her name without a single word, Queen Camilla has done what no one expected. She disappeared strategically, not sentimentally. Her calendar, once filled with garden parties, royal engagements, and ceremonial appearances, now lies conspicuously blank. Official reasons are few. Palace aides offer nothing beyond vague remarks about schedule adjustments and rest. But behind the marble walls of Clarence House, something far more calculated is unfolding. The woman once ridiculed, then crowned, and now erased, has not surrendered. She's regrouping. And those closest to her say the silence is the strategy. Within palace circles, whispers of closed-door meetings have started to intensify. Only her most trusted allies have access. Old friends, former staffers, a handful of loyal family members, those who stood with her during the darkest years are being drawn in once more, not to grieve a legacy lost, but to discuss how, or if, it can be reclaimed. The Camilla of today isn't retreating in defeat. She's recalibrating, waiting for the firestorm to pass, watching who steps forward and who steps back. Her absence from public view isn't accidental, it's a pause. And pauses, in royal circles, are often preludes to something far more seismic. There are murmurs that Camilla has already contacted a small circle of sympathetic journalists, writers with long-standing ties, who helped shape her public redemption after Diana's death. Sources suggest she's not aiming for an explosive tell-all, but something more subtle. A feature here, a quote there, pieces that reframe the narrative, not with confrontation, but with quiet control. If this is true, it would be the beginning of a carefully staged counter-narrative, one that positions her not as a cast-aside figure, but as a misunderstood partner to a king under pressure. But the palace is watching closely. So are Charles, William, and Catherine. Tensions have begun to rise behind the scenes. Camilla's relationship with the king, once her safest refuge, now bears the weight of decisions she wasn't allowed to influence. She supported him through scandal, loved him through controversy, only to be left behind when it mattered most. William, who has always been fiercely protective of the monarchy's image, is said to have grown distant. Catherine, now assuming many of Camilla's former duties, has remained composed, but her rising profile adds salt to an open wound. And yet, Camilla remains poised. Those who know her well say she's deciding whether to make one final move or disappear with dignity. If she chooses to return, it won't be loud. It'll be precise, polished, and impossible to ignore. But if she bows out, it'll be cloaked in grace, framed as prioritizing health, stability, or a return to privacy. Either way, the choice is hers, and this time, it may define how history remembers her. While Camilla regroups, the monarchy moves on with startling speed and focus. 4 names remain, and they're rewriting everything. King Charles, Princess Anne, Prince William, Princess Catherine. This is the monarchy's new blueprint. Not a family sprawling across generations, but a concentrated circle, leaner, quieter, sharper. In the aftermath of Camilla's exclusion, this inner core has become the face of the crown. And it's no accident. This isn't a monarchy adapting to survival by chance. It's a monarchy shedding its skin by choice. Gone is the symbolic inclusion of half-hearted participants. In their place stands 4 individuals, chosen not by blood alone, but by purpose, loyalty, and strategic necessity. Palace aides now refer to it bluntly as the Core 4, a phrase once whispered, now written into the fabric of royal operations. It's not just a shift in names, it's a shift in philosophy. Charles no longer leans on extended relatives for ceremonial obligations. Instead, he consolidates. Duties that once fell to Camilla are being swiftly reassigned. And it is Catherine, calm, composed, and deeply popular, who has absorbed much of the void Camilla left behind. From diplomatic receptions to patronages, the Princess of Wales is stepping into roles once promised to the Queen Consort. But now, they're not ceremonial, they're functional. earned, and every public appearance she makes carries the unspoken message. This is the future. Inside the palace, Anne's influence continues to grow. With decades of unwavering service, behind her, she has become the monarch's most trusted executor. While William shapes the monarchy's image externally, Anne defines its structure internally. Together, they provide Charles with what he needs most, a balance of reform and continuity. William, the bridge to a younger generation. Anne, the keeper of tradition. Catherine, the stabilizer in the public eye. And Charles, the man navigating a kingdom and a family in flux. The design is working. Efficiency has replaced ceremony. Clarity has replaced confusion. Royal events are no longer padded with distant cousins and outdated titles. Every name attached to the new monarchy carries weight and responsibility. It's a model that demands more from fewer people. And in an age of scrutiny, where the public expects value and visibility from those who wear the crown, this model delivers both. But for those on the outside, it's more than just a change in staffing. It's a reckoning, a redefinition of who belongs and who doesn't. The monarchy is no longer a birthright inherited by proximity. It's a brand, controlled with ruthless precision. Camilla's erasure was just the beginning. The structure is being tightened. Titles are being evaluated. Roles, once handed out with ease, are now being measured by necessity. And as the core four rise, the shadows grow deeper for those left behind. But the cutting away of roles isn't only administrative, it's deeply personal. She spent decades earning her place. Now, it's being undone, line by line. For Camilla, the journey to the throne was nothing short of historic. Vilified by the press, blamed for the collapse of a royal fairy tale, and cast aside by public opinion, she had clawed her way back into the royal fold, not through defiance, but through patience. Every ribbon cut, every hand shaken, every cause supported was a step toward legitimacy. By the time Charles ascended, her presence beside him was no longer questioned, it was accepted. And yet, that acceptance is now unraveling before her eyes, erased not with scandal, but with silence. Behind closed palace doors, a quiet process is unfolding. Titles once bestowed upon Camilla in ceremonies and speeches are now being quietly reviewed. Certain honors, symbolic, yes, but foundational to her role, are said to be under reconsideration. These aren't headlines yet, but they are whispers, whispers that carry weight. That her name is no longer mentioned in internal drafts. That events she once spearheaded are now reassigned. That some royal institutions, subtly but unmistakably, are preparing for a future without her. It's not a formal revocation, it's something colder strategic omission. The kind of erasure that doesn't draw attention until everything is already gone. To the public, reactions remain divided. There is sympathy. Even from those who never embraced her fully, many recognize the cruelty of being erased after surviving. The very gauntlet that once rejected her. But within the palace, sentiment holds little currency. The institution moves with intent, not emotion. It sees what must be protected, and what must be sacrificed. And Camilla, once the Queen Consort, is now viewed by some as the excess the crown can no longer afford. Her rise had served a purpose, but that purpose has shifted. The monarchy is evolving, and she is not a part of the new architecture. For Charles, this shift is more than symbolic. It cuts to the heart of everything he once stood for. His love for Camilla had defined his identity for decades. He fought for her place, risked public condemnation for her presence, and finally crowned her with him at his side. And yet, now, as king, he is being remembered not for what he gave, but for what he took away. History may record his reign as the moment the monarchy streamlined itself into modern relevance. But it may also remember it as the chapter where love bowed to legacy, where loyalty was overwritten by reform. The cost of duty, in this case, was deeply personal. But even with her influence fading, Camilla's final move could still change everything. The crown has moved on, but will she let it go without a final word? That is the question echoing through every royal analyst's broadcast, whispered in media circles, and debated behind velvet-curtained palace walls. Camilla may have been written out of the royal decree, but she hasn't been written off, not yet. Her silence is no longer just about composure. It's a calculated pause, a breath before what could be a final, defining move. Because if history has shown anything, it's that Camilla never retreats without reason. And when she does strike back, it's never loud, but always unforgettable. As her name fades from the center of royal duties, the stage for her next decision grows larger. Will she walk away quietly, the victim of palace politics dressed in dignity? Or will she reclaim her voice, remind the institution and the world who she is and what she endured to get here? Media outlets are bracing for either possibility. Interviews are being drafted. Op-eds are queued. Journalists with past access to Camilla are now circling, waiting for that one call, that one gesture that signals she's ready to speak. Because if she does, the tremors won't stop at the gates of Buckingham Palace. They will ripple through every layer of the monarchy's new image. Even now, the public remains divided. Her defenders call for fairness, pointing to her decades of service, her composure under scrutiny, her loyalty to a man who once defied a kingdom for her. They believe she deserves more than an unspoken exile. But others remain firm in their stance, believing her removal was a necessary course correction, one rooted not in cruelty, but in restoration. For them, Camilla's silence is overdue, and her departure inevitable. What unites both camps, however, is the same question. What will she do next? The monarchy today is no longer just built on tradition. It runs on optics, perception, and public trust. Every move is calculated not just for protocol, but for impact. And that's why Camilla's next step matters more than ever. If she breaks her silence even subtly, it could fracture the carefully constructed image the palace is working so hard to maintain. It could force Charles to reckon with choices already made. It could test the unity of the so-called Core Four. And most of all, it could challenge the narrative that the monarchy has already moved on without her. Because if Camilla chooses to speak, she won't just be defending her legacy. She'll be reshaping the one being written about everyone else. And even now, the palace isn't sure whether to prepare for a farewell or a return. Because this wasn't just a name missing on paper, it was a signal. The monarchy has changed, and the world is still watching. Drop your thoughts in the comments section, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And we will see you in the next one.